much more than just inequality, I think what troubles me even more in our world is our indifference to this inequality, to our absence of outrage. I work among homeless people, and most of you work, I think, among the rural poor, so I thought I'd show you a small video, if I could, of a 2-minute video, just a glimpse of homeless people there. Yeah? Working with homeless people was something that I decided to do after I left the IAS. I quit in 2002 after the Gujarat massacre. And I felt I needed to engage in a different battle for the soul of India. But once I started living in the city of Delhi again, I thought, if I do anything, I must work among homeless people. Because these are people we see every single day of our lives. And we know them so little, and we care even less. So, yes, please.
रूप से पीछे है, ये हर जगह वंचित समाज है। यदि आपको भाईचारा कहीं देखना है, तो वो सबसे बड़ा भाईचारा आप इन लोगों के बीच में पाएंगे। तो जैसे 4-5 के ग्रुप है, कोई एक व्यक्ति कमा के लाएगा और ये चारों व्यक्ति खाते हैं। शहर की अपेक्षा गांव में रोजगार पूरी तरह से खत्म कर दिए गए हैं, तो गांव के लोग बिल्कुल मजबूर हैं, उन्हें मतलब कोई रास्ता नहीं दिखता सिवाय पलायन के। मेरा नाम सत्यवीर है और मैं उत्तर प्रदेश के फतेहपुर जिले का रहने वाला हूँ। वैसे जन्मजात में किसान हूँ। आने का उद्देश्य ये था कि शहर में मैं लोगों को खोज लूँगा जो मेरे गांव के हैं, परिवार के हैं, लेकिन दिल्ली की चकाचौंध में सब खो गया। तो इस वजह से मैं बेघर रहा। सहादरा के लेबर चौक पर काम करता था, घर बनाने का काम, शादी पार्टियों का काम भी किया। पूरा देश जब एक सुलगने की ओर जा रहा है, हिंदू मुस्लिम मंदिर मस्जिद, तो ये सुबह उठते हैं, सबसे पहले मंदिर जाते हैं क्योंकि हनुमान मंदिर पास पड़ता है। हनुमान मंदिर में वही बजरंगबली की जो उनकी आराम से पूड़ी कचौड़ी खाते हैं। उसके बाद वो मस्जिद जाते हैं जहाँ उन्हें नॉनवेज खाना होता है, तो वो सारी चीज़ें मिल जाती हैं। और जब कहीं कुछ नहीं मिलता तो सिखों का गुरुद्वारा है शीशगंज में, लोग वहाँ जाते हैं, लोग खाते हैं, खा पी के लौट के आके इन्हीं रैन बसेरों में फिर सो जाते हैं। उनसे समझा जाए कि वो कैसा भारत चाहते हैं, तो वो यही कहेंगे कि जहाँ अच्छी नींद और भरपेट खाना हो, मुझे ऐसा भारत चाहिए।
So in my work with homeless people, I learned many things. But most of all, I learned about how profound was our indifference. The child who is starving in a tribal village somewhere, maybe I don't see them, maybe I can forget. But I see a homeless child every day. I see many of them every day. I come home, after a film or a visit to a restaurant. I've spent a lot of money. I come home, I give everything that I can to my child. I give her protection, I give her care, I give her food, I give her the best education. It doesn't trouble me that just 1 kilometer away lies another street child whom I saw when I passed, who will sleep under the open sky, who found her food in a waste dump, who will perhaps get raped in the middle of the night, who will have to wake up at 4 in the morning to find waste and collect it so that she can eat the next day. And the fact that she's just my daughter's age, nothing, and that 1 kilometer that separates us separates her from my daughter becomes the longest distance in the world. So it is this indifference. Hunger, I've worked with people living with hunger for many years. I remember sitting among a group of Musahar women, Dalit women in eastern UP, and they spoke of many things, and then they said, you know, what is the most difficult lesson of all that we had to teach our children? And I said, what is it? And they said, it is the lesson of how to sleep hungry. And I was thinking about my own daughter and what would have life looked like to me if I had to sit her down and say, everything, you know, whatever I do, there will be nights when I can't give you food. Many nights. And all I can give to you at that time is to teach you how to sleep hungry. And they spoke about how they looked for food, and they found, you know, food, undigested pieces of grain in the dung of cattle. And I found it hard to believe, and now I've read a lot of Dalit autobiographies, where people actually talk about growing up eating food taken out from the dung of cattle. So we're talking about the absence of food, of nutrition, of healthcare, of children being snatched away, bodies and brains not forming, the hopelessness of hunger, dying because of the absence of healthcare. Our indifference, what toll does it take? Akhil Gupta is a social scientist based at UCLA. He asked a very interesting question. He asked, how many people die in India every year for completely preventable causes, meaning dying of hunger or lack of clean water or lack of health care. And he came up with a conservative estimate of 2 million people. The number of people who died in the Great Bengal famine, our last famine, was 3 million people. So what I'm saying is, we're seeing something like the Great Bengal famine happen around us every year, amidst all our wealth, and we don't even notice. We've just been through a general elections. Who was ever speaking about these issues? The lack of health care, my father is 93 years old, my mother recently passed away. I've spent many of the recent years in hospitals, in and out. And I'm truly grateful that my father has survived, but I'm acutely aware that my father is alive only because he worked in the IS and he was in the United Nations and he had an insurance that could allow to pay for medical bills of lakhs and lakhs of rupees. If he wasn't born here, he wouldn't be alive. And where is the justice in a world where simply, again, the accident of your birth determines whether you can live or die? My grandson was born a few months ago, and I keep telling my daughter that I feel scarred somewhere, that I can't enjoy him fully. Because every time we're taking care, and this sanitation, and he should be protected this way, and everything should be clean and sanitized and so on. I think of thousands of homeless people who we work with, children being born on the streets, with no one who can take care about sanitation and cleanliness and nutrition. I think that when the history of our times is written, it will be seen as one of the most cruel and barbaric periods in human history. And let me explain why. It is not as if this kind of hunger or homelessness or the absence of health care didn't exist in earlier periods. But we never lived in a time where we have the resources many times over to ensure that no child should actually have to sleep without food or without a roof over their head or without health care. Just India's food stocks is something like sometimes around 70 million tons. It won't make sense to any of us. My friend Jodrez explained to me that 70 million tons means that if each sack of grain is put in a line, then you can go from the earth to the moon. You can come back and circle the world a few times. That is the amount of grain we have rotting in India's government warehouses. Yet something like 213 million people sleep hungry every night in India today. And every third child is malnourished. And malnourishment means that the children's body and brain is not being allowed to build up to full potential, or they die of simple ailments which, if they were nourished, they wouldn't die of. With this amount of food available to us. Let me tell you something else. In the year 2017, the wealth of the top 1% increased. Just the increase in the wealth of the top 1% in India was more than India's union budget. And by contrast, for the poorest half of India's population, in the same year, the increase in wealth was about 1%. But the important point is that just the increase in the wealth of the top 1% was more than India's union budget. When we say we don't have the resources, we'll have to wait a generation or two longer. We have the resources many times over to ensure that that this kind of preventable suffering ends. India has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratios in the world. But even globally, it has been calculated that just a 1.5% tax on the wealth of the dollar billionaires of the world, 1.5% tax, would be enough to send every child to a decent school and to provide them enough food, nutrition, and healthcare. Why do we not make these public investments? And here India again stands in, the scandal of privatization of healthcare and the absence of the kind of service that CMC provides for most of India. It is both a scandal and an outrage. Why do we not make these public investments? Why are we not, now most countries in the world at least have some kind of universal healthcare and a common school system. We don't have both. So India and China may be equally unequal. But if I'm on the bottom 10% in China and on the bottom 10% in India, it's much harder life for me in India, because at the bottom 10% in China, I would still have a decent school to send my child to. And when she falls ill, I would have a public hospital where I could take her. I don't have either in India. And we're not doing it for no reason except that the lives of the very poor and people of disadvantaged castes do not matter to us. I think we have an extraordinary cultural comfort level with inequality and injustice. We don't feel a sense of outrage. And that is what troubles me. As I said, it's not just inequality of a scale that is difficult to imagine, but it's the inequality with indifference, the fact that we don't care. The second crisis that I spoke about was of rising hate and intolerance. In a recent book of mine, I described this as the partitions of the heart. That was the title of my book. I spoke about one partition that we saw on the land of this country. But now millions and millions of partitions are happening in our hearts and minds. we are being raised, we are raising our children, our leaders, our media, our social media are just teaching us to hate somebody of a different religion, somebody who looks different, who worships differently. And it manifests itself most of all in an epidemic of what I truly call it an epidemic of lynching. We're seeing incidents of lynching happening across the country, and we hardly notice. There's something about these lynchings which is very similar to what happened in the United States from the last decade of the 19th century to till the time of the civil rights movement. These are public lynchings. What the United States saw was performative lynching. So African Americans were lynched publicly, and there were big events where families would gather. It was almost like a picnic, and they would watch while, the person was attacked, the body was dismembered, and the person was hung publicly. And about 4,000 of these incidents happened, 4,700 I think have been recorded in over 60 years in the United States. The performative character, the numbers are not large, like the numbers of lynching today are not large if you make a chronological list. But one of the American historians talked about lynching. She said that every lynching was like 1,000 lynchings, which reverberated across the land, across the seas, across the mountains, and planted fear in the heart of every African American. In India, the lynchings that are happening are once again, every lynching is like 10,000 lynchings. So one Muslim boy is lynched on a train close to Delhi, and I have a number of young Muslim friends and co-workers, and they say that their mother tells them, be careful when you travel on a train. If I phone you, don't answer salam alaikum. If there's any discussion, don't get involved. If there's a political discussion, definitely don't get involved, because people will find out you're Muslim. So this one lynching becomes like 10,000 lynchings. These lynchings are extremely cruel. So it's not just that you are lynching somebody, that a mob attacks them, but that they are done with great cruelty. And I've traveled around the country to virtually every site of lynching over the last, it's been my most predominant work and response in recent years, which is overtaking everything else. I feel somehow we have to fight this. And I've seen that the lynchings are of extreme cruelty. So eyes are gouged out, genitals are smashed with stones. There's something that has got unleashed in our society. And this is what has got unleashed is a sense of the legitimized nature and the valorized nature of this hatred. So I'm not ashamed of my hatred. I'm actually a hero if I act out this hatred. And therefore, what is also extraordinary about almost every incident of lynching that we are seeing across the country is its videotaping. So the perpetrators videotape it. Now, it's amazing that you're committing a crime which could put you in jail for the rest of your life or send you to the gallows, and you're actually videotaping yourself and you're putting it up on social media. What does it indicate? It indicates, firstly, that you think you've done some act of great heroism. But secondly, and you're assured of your that nobody's going to punish you. In fact, you'll be treated as a hero. But also, you're trying to give a message to the community. So people are begging for their lives while they are being lynched. And it goes on for 2 hours, 3 hours. I don't want to describe these incidents, but just to illustrate the level of horror, just close to Delhi again in Hapur, an hour's journey away, a 45-year-old Muslim man, very poor, suddenly a rumor goes out that he has killed a cow, and a crowd gathers, and they start, and because it is videotaped, You see that a lot of the people who are there are children in their teens, young people. They come with everything that they can find in their homes, including screwdrivers, even pens, to pierce as pen as a weapon. And when we met the family later, there was not a portion of their body which hadn't been pierced. And this, with this cruelty, somebody who's like your father, somebody you've grown up in the presence of, is being killed in this way. It is videotaped. So it is, I see the video camera now performing the same kind of role as the performative lynchings of the past, like we saw in the United States. So, where is the solution? And that is where, to all of this, to this inequality with indifference, and to this rising hate, I do believe that the answer, the core answer, is in what I describe as public compassion. It is written into our constitution, and to most constitutions, a word that most of us don't even think about. We talk about justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. What does fraternity mean? Fraternity literally means brotherhood. It's a problematic word because it doesn't seem to include sisterhood. But the Hindi version of the Constitution actually has a really beautiful expression of fraternity. The word that is used is bandhuta. Bandhuta is derived from the Sanskrit. It is the idea that we are bound, we are all bound to and with each other. We might worship different gods, we might look different, we might be of different castes and different languages, but we are bound to and with each other. So when this boy, Junaid, was lynched on a train close to Delhi, it was one of the early lynchings, and I'd gone to his family, and spontaneously I wrote an article which started with the words, "Junaid was my son." I do not know him when he was alive. His world and mine were very different. I'm an agnostic. He was studying to be an imam. But in the way that he is killed, I mourn him like he is my son. Then I went on to say that he was also the son of those on the train. Not one person came to his rescue as they all stabbed this 14-year-old boy. I said he was also the son of those on that train compartment where he was stabbed. He was also the son. They threw him out onto a platform, and he bled to death over 45 minutes. No one came to his rescue. I said he was also the son of those on that platform who did not come to help him. So this idea that we are bound to and each other, that if you are suffering, tears come into my eyes. That, to my mind, is the core idea of fraternity. And if that idea is nurtured, then I will not be able to look at that homeless girl sleeping outside my home and look away. And if we don't look away, solutions are not so difficult. Just illustratively, I trying to understand how we can work with homeless children. I'm there in Delhi. There's something like 60, 70,000. In Chennai, there would be about 40, 50,000 homeless children. What can we do for them? It seems like a huge problem. I learned from the work of Sister Cyril in Sealda, and she used to be the principal of this Loreto Sealda, conventional school, convent school for middle-class children. A little girl, a street girl, got raped just outside the gate of her convent school one night. And she had a moment of epiphany where she felt that, but at the time when the child needed a place of safety, my school was empty. 16 hours a day, every school is empty. So she made up her mind that she will open up her school, add an extra floor, and bring in homeless children, with all the opposition. Learning from her work, I said, why can't we do this in a government school? And it seemed really impossible, but we struggled, and now we have about 50 schools across the country where government schools have been converted into residential spaces. And potentially, actually, if every school in every city in the country is converted into a place of safety for children, no child needs to sleep under the open sky. And it doesn't cost very much. Or, for instance, working among the homeless, I used to find a lot of deaths of people with TB. Now, I realized that if I'm homeless, even if I get TB, and there's a very high chance of getting TB, even if I get into a public hospital, after a little while they'd say, okay, now go home, let your family take care of you, have good nutrition. I don't have a home, I don't have a family. So what options do I have? I just die on the streets. So what can be a solution? And the solution was not that complicated. I said that we will create a space where any homeless person who has TB, we'll take them in for a year. And say, you don't have to worry for a year. We'll ensure nutrition, we'll ensure your treatment, we'll take care of you. And so they used to come almost dead and walk out after a year, able-bodied.